Good morning. It's good to be with you on this Tuesday morning as we continue together in our time in Luke's gospel. I've enjoyed Luke. I was talking about Luke recently, and it's funny. Luke to me is a gospel that I just don't think about a lot because you've heard me say many times, Matthew is my favorite. John is so mystical, um, and deep, and I appreciate John. Mark is to the point. So I kind of forget about Luke, but if we're going to compare the gospel to the Beatles, um, which I don't know who else amongst us are going to do that other than me. You know, I John may be to me George Harrison because we take him for granted. And I'm not one of those folks that says George is the best Beatle. I would never say that. But there's some that say, well, George is technically. I'm like, I don't know, but George is underrated. And you're like, yeah, I like George's stuff. My guitar gently weeps a great song. I think I'm coming to feel that way about Luke. I don't think a lot about Luke, but now that I'm really 7 chapters into it, going pretty deep with it, I'm like, man, this is good stuff. Like, it's the same stuff we see at the places, but I'm enjoying this. Luke is fun. So let's dig into Luke chapter. Apologize for my Beatles riff there, but it's early in the morning. You got to appreciate some good Beatles early in the morning. So let's read John 7, 11 through 17. Soon after, he went to a town called Nain, and his disciples and a large crowd were with him. As he approached the gate of the town, a man who had died was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow, and with her was a large crowd from the town. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion for her and said to her, "Do not weep." Then he came forward and touched the bier, and the bear stood still. And he said, "Young man, I said to you, rise." The dead man stood up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. Fear seized all of them, and they glorified God, saying, "A great prophet has risen among us, and God has looked favorably upon his people." The word about him spread throughout Judea and all the surrounding country. So, beautiful story here of Jesus raising the widow's son. Um, and this story tells us a lot. It first and foremost shows Jesus' power over life and death. I like the notes I was reading this morning. It was careful to say he was resuscitated, not resurrected, because he would yet die again. I'm like, well, that's a good point. I guess I never thought about it that way. Is that everybody that Jesus brought back from the death would die eventually. Unlike us, when we are resurrected in the end of time, we will live forever, in eternity. So he goes, and there's a large crowd following him. He goes to the town. A man had died. We don't, man meaning older. Um, I'm assuming unyet married because there is no wife mentioned here. He was mother's only son, and she was a widow. And those are very significant things. Mother's only son, and she was a widow. That means he's all she had. He's all she had. Her husband was gone. So all she had was her son, and her son had a duty to take care of him, take care of her rather. That was the son's duty. The son's job was to care for his widowed mother. That was his highest, in many ways, some of his highest calling was to do this. And now that he had passed, she had no one to care for her. She was now essentially destitute. She was now essentially with no help, no source of income, nothing to sustain her. She was essentially utterly destitute. When her son died, she lost all that she had. One of the things that Jesus does repeatedly in the gospel, particularly in Luke's gospel, chapter 4, chapter 18, chapter 20, 21, we see that Jesus cares for the widows. There are two, the Bible talks about widows and orphans a lot. A widow would be a woman whose husband had died and normally had no children. Not always, but normally had no children. Um, and so for a widow to lose a child would have put her without any any source of income or provision or sustaining her anything. She lost her only way to live. And of course, an orphan is someone without parents. So they would have had no identity, no protection, no anything. So these are very, in Jesus' day, the very vulnerable amongst them. These are the ones that have nothing. A married woman has a husband to care for her. A widow with children has children to provide for her. Think of how destitute Ruth was when we read Ruth and Naomi. So, but a widow who lost her child, particularly lost her son, she has nothing. She has nothing. Nothing. An orphan would have no parents to provide, to care, to teach, to mold, to help them find a career and a path to live. Had nothing. So, for a widow to lose their child, lose their son, she has nothing. She has nothing. She has nothing. So verse 13, when the Lord saw her, he had compassion for her and said, Do not weep. He came and touched the bier, and the bear stood still. He said, Young man, I say to you, rise. The dead man got up and began to speak. And Jesus gave him to his mother. Jesus restored her life. It isn't just that he gave her back a son, it's that he restored her life. He restored her path to sustenance in life and living. And what's everybody say? Fear seized all of them. They glorified God of great promise rose among us. I, I think the reason why I love Luke, growing to love Luke, is that with Luke we see Jesus' love for the underdog. In Luke we see Jesus' love for the little guy, the forgotten, the forsaken, the widow who has nothing, the widow who has nothing. Now, as death has taken from her, she has nothing. And Jesus now gives her life back. She now has a path to live. It's easy for us to look past the folks on the margins. If you live in a city like Jackson, the folks we see on the corner of Lakeland, you know, it's easy. It's easy for us to look past the woman being abused, the child in trouble, the difficult child. It's easy for us to look past them because they make our life harder. It's easy for us to focus on our busyness and our schedule and our stuff and forget that these are individuals for whom Christ died, the same way that Christ died for me and for you. What is the quote? What C.S. Lewis said, You'll never meet a mere mortal. Everyone is someone of worth to God." Jesus pushes us to see the folks people forget about. Jesus pushes us past power and past privilege and past these things to focus on what really matters, and not just what really matters, but who really matters. And it's everyone. It's everyone. It's people we love, people we don't love, the people we like, people we don't like, the people who agree with us, people who disagree with us. But there's so many folks on the margins. So many folks on the margins, like this widow who had nothing, that Jesus restored her life. She didn't just raise the son, he gave her life. Pay attention to the margins, friends. Pay attention to the margins. Look who's there. Look who's on the back wall. Look who the wallflowers are. Pay attention to the margins. We as the church, we as Christians, we're supposed to look. We're supposed to follow Jesus to those places where the broken are. We've heard it said of the church is supposed to be a hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. A hospital for sinners, not a museum for saints. And that means we're gonna have bloody, messy people in the same way that the hospital does. But Jesus calls us to the margins. The margins. That's where he went today. And that's where he calls us. So I guess our question is, will we follow? Will we follow him to the margins? because that's where he calls us to. Thanks for being with us. Let's love the folks we meet in our life. And let's love the folks it's hard to love. See you in the morning. Have a great day.